about the events that really happened. And please tell me if I'm boring you.
No.
Throw things at me. Don't leave the musket balls there. Don't throw those because they hurt. No. All right. So the events. So we need to understand that here is the most powerful army in the world sitting down in Aquidneck Island, surrounded by a bunch of hostile forces. It's been a really cold, brutal winter. This is the winter of Valley Forge kind of stuff for. This was a nasty winter. They've been cooped up all winter long. It's a bunch of young men with not a lot to do. They've essentially, if you forgive me, but they've essentially raped and pillaged Newport clean for the last couple of years. It's just a really crazy place. And you have to remember that the regulars, their nose was really bloodied after the events of July 1777. That's why I brought up William Barton. It really was a bloody nose. Here they were able to sneak into a camp and steal, literally, the commanding officer. Pretty impressive. And so what happened was we have word that there was a Tory spy in Warren, Rhode Island. We don't know who it was, but they suspect it was the schoolmaster. And he informed General Piggott down in Newport that there was a series of supplies and boats up in Warren and up the Kickamet River, and they were preparing to make vessels to attack. And the truth is there was attack being planned constantly. They were trying to get an attack on Newport since the British had invaded. So really the whole place was on edge, and that brings us to collectively what we know as the Mount Hope raids.
So,
yes, please.
Dad, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it the first Congregational Church in Bristol that was set on fire in this raid?
No. It was actually the King's Church.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The Episcopal Church.
Yeah.
The Episcopal Church that was set on fire by the British troops.
Okay.
They thought it was the Congregationalist Church, but it wasn't. So they stole all the silver and gold out of the King's Church.
But it wasn't the Brits that did that. Who was it?
It
was the Hessians who were with the Brits.
They were with the Brits.
Yeah, absolutely.
They took everything out of the church, which was the British King's Church.
And then toasted.
And then you burnt the church around.
Absolutely. 22 homes were lost. I mean,
they were for hire, so they didn't care.
Yeah, the Hessians were for hire. They were absolutely. So that leads us to the Battle of Falls River. So as I've already told you, at the time this area was referred to as Freetown or Lower Freetown. And more specifically, this area was referred to as the area or village of Falls River, not Fall River. And the reason why is the Quiggashan word, or Quiggashan is the Wampanoag word for falling river, or we can see that it is also either leaping or falling waters. And that's the reason why this area was called Quiggashan. The Durfee farm or the Durfee estate really was near where the battle occurred. In fact, we're going to talk about that when we get to Fall River. We'll talk a little bit about Mount Hope raids, and it sounds like I got somebody who knows a bit about it, so you can help me. And by all means, correct me. I'm not sitting here saying I know everything. So in this area, we consisted of about 20 homes. Most of them congregated up on Main Street, but some of them down at the mouth of the river, right where the Battleship Massachusetts area would be today, in that area. That was a bunch of sawmills, grist mills, grain mills, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And on the south side, which plays an important role, was Thomas and Richard Borden, and on the north side was Stephen Borden. They were all family, and they all had sawmills and grain mills, et cetera. And oh, I know why I did that. Let me go back, I'm sorry. I'm sitting here going, why did I do that? I did that for this reason. If you'll notice, I've highlighted the Quiggashan River, and you'll notice there is no Fall River there. There is Dighton, and there is Swansea. And if I blew out the map, you could see there is Bedford. There is no Dartmouth. There is no New Bedford. There is no... And this map is from 1777.
So part of this was still Rhode Island. It's like, I've heard things about the border changing.
Yeah, well, so we can talk a little bit about that. So the border, yeah, well, it's kind of a weird thing. Pawtucket, Rhode Island, was actually Pawtucket, Massachusetts. And it was after the settlement, and then Dave knows the date, I don't know, but I want to say it was 1820, maybe 1803. The border was changed from where it is today. That's where it was moved to, but originally it was like Division Street, so it was a lot closer this way.
It was Columbia Street.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
was
I
it
thought it was
It was in the middle of Main Street, from Columbia Street.
from Columbia? Yeah.
Further down on Main Street, almost next to Harry's restaurant, there was a tree there.
Yeah, the Buttonwood tree.
That's where the bump.
That was the
So
demarcation.
it wasn't at Columbia Street, it was further north.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's the Buttonwood tree, and that was the demarcation. Yep, exactly. And I didn't know it was actually there, so thank you. So I just put this map in here to help you get a bearing in today's world. So part of what I like about history and I like about technology is it allows us to bring things together to help things come to life, if you will. And so this is, when we look at this, this is the Durfee Estate overlaid, the
Wow.
map in
Wow.
2016. So this is what it really, this was the Durfee Estate. It went from the Watuppa Pond all the way down to the Taunton River. This is about Turner Street, maybe a little bit further past that going, what is that, north?
Yes.
and this is right over here, Center Street going south. So you can see, and here's Bedford Street. Going down through. So you can see it was a huge tract of land.
So where's the Quikasham River?
Well, we're going to show you that in a second. Because the Quikasham River now is buried.
Oh, it's in the highway.
Yeah, and so what they're really doing is,
It's right where the highway is.
Yeah, but I can see the pond now.
Yeah.
I was looking at
the rule of, there's a group out there trying to daylight the
Yeah.
Quikasham River, so
Like
very nice.
Providence.
So this is an 1812 map. This is the oldest map I could find of Fall River. And I've overlaid it with some transparency so we can kind of get a sense of where we are in relation to what's going on. So you'll notice that this line says the Rodman Farm because at this time it was now the Rodman Farm. In 1812 it was now owned by the Rodmans. As I said, he lost a lot of his estate, but this wasn't all of his estate, which is important. So now you'll notice this is the Quikasham River. And what's important to understand about the Quikasham River is where the State House, City Hall is today. There was actually a pond. It was actually the pond that fed the Quikasham River, and the Quikasham River actually went down in a series of waterfalls. Now we're not talking real super tall waterfalls, but we're talking waterfalls. And I think they said there was about 7 or 8 of them.
It was very,
That went
very
down.
noisy.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Because of the falls.
I would imagine.
People, well, I read history, and people in Fall River had crossed they had a lot of bridges
Yep.
over it, and a lot of people actually committed suicide in that river, and it was very, very noisy because of the falls.
Well, I think that you brought up a great point that I'm going to jump on now. That bridge, there is a bridge that's really of importance, plays an important role in our conversation. And that bridge we suspect was around this area, and it was a wood bridge. And it was nothing more than planks. The question is, I've been trying to figure out how wide it is, and I haven't been able to find any record of it, but we do know that it was wide enough to travel, and it was right up about that area, right about where Main Street is today, in that general area. So that gives you an idea of where the Durfee farm was, and that's in 1778, now overlaid to give you an idea of how it is. And then also, again, just to show you and highlighting here, the deer park. So what is the deer park? The Durfees had a deer park where they kept deer. That becomes an important piece in our story a little bit later on as well. But they kept deer, so it was a big, giant park that they just kind of kept deer in.
They farm deer, or they just?
No, they were wild deer, but they tried to keep them contained in those areas. And right, yeah.
Those buggers can jump.
Yeah, no, it wasn't anything of farming. It was more like they were trying to contain them, and it was a park. But it was for food. We have to remember that this area is all ledge. So this farming in this area wasn't farming like we traditionally think of. It would have been primarily lumber, primarily hooved animals, things that could move well on the ground. So let's take us into setting the stage for the Mount Hope raids. We're going to move out of Fall River and we're going to move back over to Warren and Bristol. This is a map from 1777. And what happens is in the early hours of the morning, around 5 in the morning is what the records say, there's a landing of 500 regulars and Hessian chasseurs. Did I say that right, my Frenchman? Chasseurs. Landing at Bristol Neck at Papa Squash. And so that's kind of in this area. And so they land about 5 o'clock in the morning. John Campbell, Colonel Campbell, splits his troops up, and he sends some up to Warren, and he sends some up the Kickamoot River. As he goes up the Kickamoot River, Archibald Cray, who's the commander of the militia in this area, has about 300 men under arms, but he's told that it's several thousand that have landed on the shore. So he turns tail and runs toward Providence. All right, I'm being unfair to him. He retreats, thinking that he's outmanned and he's got to run away to live to fight another day. So he starts to retreat with 300 men under arms back toward Providence. The troops come in and they forage and they raid along the Kickamoot River. They're destroying boats, they're destroying mills. There's a story of one mill owner begging the soldiers not to burn his mill, where they take him captive, burn his mill, and beat the dickens out of him. Sorry, yeah, by all means.
You can go on.
Oh, okay.
You see the neck coming down from the river?
From the Kickamoot?
Yeah.
In here?
No, the other side.
On this side?
No. Cross.
Over here.
Go north.
Go north.
That next branch?
Yes.
East. So the
East, okay.
Okay, come down to the point,
Yeah.
right?
To this point?
No,
This point?
Water, there. Between there and the top of the Kickamoot vein,
Oh, okay.
right in there. Between those two,
Yeah.
there was reportedly a French redoubt there.
Oh, okay.
Oh, really?
A French redoubt?
Yep.
Really? Interesting. In 77?
Yeah.
We'll have to check that out.
Because there's a golf course there now.
Unfortunately, that happened to a lot of the colonial period.
If you look at the typographical map showing the different layers of land, you could see that the land had a V shape to it,
So they had put a redoubt there.
where the cannon would have been
Sure.
mounted.
Now, redoubt, explain to me exactly what a redoubt is.
It's a earthen fort that was made. So if you think about it, normally they're in star shapes, but often might just have a simple V or a box. And it essentially is you would dig about 4 to 5 feet down and build that dirt up.
So was it manned?
Yeah, oh yeah, it would have been a man
Supposedly
fort.
by French troops.
Sure, it would have been a man fort, of course.
Yeah, so at the time, I was wondering if it was manned.
Well, not in 78, I don't think. It might have been earlier. It might have been earlier,
I'm not sure.
but or later.
I just
certainly
found-
could be
I
later.
just found a topographical map that showed that
That's very interesting.
section of land there, and before I could get in there and look at it,
Yeah.
or get permission to get in there and look at it, a golf course got in there, and it's gone now.
Yeah.
Man, that's awful.
Oh, too bad he couldn't have, so it could have been,
You know, the entrance would have been
Saved.
off Schoolhouse Road.
Oh, yeah.
That's awful. So one of the things that happened is the sloop Washington gets set on fire, but fortunately it doesn't burn. The militia is able to, or colonists or whoever, were able to get there and stop it from burning completely, but it did. The truth is 60 other boats were destroyed, whether they were hacked or burned or what, we don't know, but they were destroyed. And a lot more prisoners were taken and brought back to Warren, Rhode Island. So this is always a fun story that I like to tell. It's a little side note, and it's the Ephraim Cole farm incident. So what happened is Ephraim Cole, and I don't know if this is where his farm is, but it's in this general area. Ephraim Cole was in his farm, and 3 to 4 British regulars were up on a foraging raid. They were looking to get food or whatever they could get. And they come into his farmland. Now he's out in his field and he's out there hoeing, trying to get ready to plant his crops. Because it's May, it's early, he's still trying to get things ready. He's out there hoeing, and he sees the British coming, so he says, what am I going to do? He jumps behind the fence and hides behind the stone wall, hoping they're going to go away. Well, they continue to come at him. And he continues to try and hide. And they get closer and closer and closer. And finally he realizes that he's got to do something or he's toast. So he jumps up, points his hoe as if it were a musket, and yells, "Come on, boys, let's get him. We'll have lobster for dinner." Now, apparently he had a very loud, booming voice, and it startled the regulars. They were regulars. They dropped their muskets and started to run. He, I guess in the excitement of everything, and I don't know how old this gentleman was, jumps the stone wall, chases after him, catches one of them, and takes him as a prisoner. Now, why we know this later in the story, and we find out that when he goes back into Warren and turns this guy in as a prisoner, he records it as, "We surrounded him and took him prisoner." And he did it with a hoe. I just think it's a great story. I just think it's fun, and it's a little bit
What amazes me is they drop their muskets.
well, I think it's hard for us to understand in our world because we've been so conditioned that, soldier fights and blah, blah, blah. But you have to remember that a lot of these people were impressed into service. They were young men. They'd never really been in battle, or if they were in battle, they were with a bunch of other people. And so when you're isolated like that, and especially you got to remember, they knew that the militia was out there. So they thought that they were being attacked by the full force of the militia. So I can understand why they ran. I really can.
Not running, but drop.
Oh, yeah, no.
Their
Because,
armament.
well, I mean, when you look at a musket,
I know they're big and heavy.
but the big thing about the musket is you can get one shot off, and then it has to become,
That's it.
then it has to be a weapon
Yeah.
of swinging, or you have to put the bayonet on it. And it's just not a weapon that is, it's not like we think today, is we can shoot our way out. It's not like Al Capone pulling a bank job or anything.
Yeah.
You get one shot.
But those are valuable, and I can just imagine the recovery of them.
Yeah.
How much of that was the colonists were considered guerrillas, terrorists in a way?
Absolutely,
But,
absolutely.
they were not following the rules of war.
Well, this is an argument, and historians will argue this forever. Neither did the British.
Okay.
And the thing is that the British had learned how to fight Indian style, is what they called it, during the French and Indian War. So we were fighting the same way. Now there was the traditional European style of fighting where you lined up and looked at each other, and that happened, but most of the time it was,
Guerrilla style.
yeah, it was to do whatever you could do. It was try to still live to fight another day. So Warren was razed essentially. 22 buildings were destroyed. The government and churches and homes. The powder magazine was blown up and supposedly took 6 houses with it when it was blown up.
Do you know, when they took prisoners, did they take the women and children too?
Absolutely. If it was something that,
Who's gonna cook? I'm sorry.
yeah, well, absolutely. And that's another thing that I don't think people realize about the colonial life. Soldiers had their wives and families with them. And that's who did a lot of, exactly right, did a lot of the cooking for the soldiers. Because you were on your own. You didn't get food.
Right, so they would take the wives and the girls and daughters and force them to do their cooking for them.
They would force them to do a lot worse things.
Well, that goes without saying, but I was just thinking,
Yeah.
I didn't know if they actually took the women and the children.
They could.
Men.
I mean, they could. And most of the time, and especially in this condition of the prisoners, I think it was 29 that was taken during this raid, and most of them were returned within the next couple of days because all they were doing was making sure you weren't going to get them. And if you were really a farmer and they could discover that you really were a farmer, they would just send you back home. It wasn't. It wasn't kind of prisoner of war kind of mentality we have today. Now, if he was somebody that they knew was trying to fight them, then your treatment was not so nice. Yeah, it was not nice either. So what happens is during this time, Colonel Barton, who's in Providence, finds out about the raids happening, and he's got about 200 odd men under arms. He comes down with those guys, and he meets up with Cray's militia and turns them back around, and they start coming back toward Bristol and Warren. And so what happens is after Warren is done and they've done their duty and all that nastiness that they did, they start marching down the main road back to Bristol. And along the way, Barton harasses the British the entire way. The interesting thing is there were no significant injuries on either side. No dead are recorded. However, Barton is wounded, and that wound, he gets shot in the groin, and he fights for the rest of the day with the bullet wound in his groin.
That's the adrenaline.
And but he essentially ends his military career. He would have been a rising star in the Revolutionary
How old was he
War.
when he died?
Barton was, I don't know, 80-something. He died in poverty up in Vermont. There's a whole long story with Barton.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Barton's, he was an older man. There's a whole long story. He was in prison for 20 years. It's crazy. And I don't know the story well enough to tell it, just to tell you that much. If you look it up, you'll find it.
I will.
It's really, he got himself into all sorts of trouble.
Book is
Yeah.
Hidden Histories of Rhode Island.
Is that the name of the book? Hidden Histories of Rhode Island? There you go.
Is that
Awesome.
what you got?
No, this is on the Civil War.
Nice.
It's by the same author,
Is that
Okay. Let me get it.
is that Bernie?
Frank.
French?
Frank Brisbane.
Frank
No,
Brisbane?
not the guy I'm thinking. Nice.
Oh.
So
You
the
gotta
regulars, so the regulars loot and they destroy Bristol, Rhode Island. And there's a couple of stories in there. I don't know if you want me to tell you the story, but I will, unless you tell me to stop. So there's one home where the lady is tending to some of the British as they're retreating, and she's taking care of some of their wounds and mending them. And the Hessians come in, and the Hessians decide that they're gonna just pillage the place and whatnot. So they're in there, and they've actually got her climbing up on top of her cabinets, and they're having her bring down the china and whatever. And they're looking at it, and if they like it, they're sticking in their boots. If they don't like it, they're smashing it in front of her. And so what happens is a British officer comes in and sees them doing that. And he essentially comes in and he smacks them across the head and kicks them out, and he says, "We don't perform like that, blah, blah, blah," kind of stuff. "We're honorable men. I promise you, ma'am, no one will hurt your home for the rest of the time we're here." And he really did kind of a great thing, except that she discovers that she looks at it, he had a silver riding crop that he hit the Hessian with, came from one of the other members of town. He had stolen it. So he was honorable to only a certain degree, which I think is funny.
You probably didn't like the Hessians.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. That's probably true. And that's really kind of the tavern incident. And then Barton chases the regulars off of Bristol Ferry. Now, another thing that's kind of interesting or important for us is the United Train of Artillery, which was one of the oldest military units or cannonade units in the United States, actually is firing against the British as they're trying to come across, coming back to Common Fence Point. So Bristol Ferry, which is where the Mount Hope Bridge is today.
Well, when the British started coming into town with the Hessians, the militia didn't know what to do.
Right.
They didn't know how many there were.
Right. They thought.
They didn't want to be captured.
Yep.
They didn't want to lose anything. So they moved over to Mount Hope Farm, which is over by the old Nike site,
Uh-huh.
up on that rise
Yep.
to the east of the point there. They were hiding over there. And after they heard the other guys coming down, they
Right.
got in contact with them.
They joined.
came out.
Right, and helped.
Merged.
So when Barton came back with his militia, they merged and came back.
Right.
And started firing. And then there was a battle between the 2nd Artillery Unit of the Royal Army, back and forth. And you know, the record says that they were knocking each other's cannons out and stuff like that. But nobody was hurt.
The British ship was in Bristol Harbor, shelling the houses in town.
So what I like to do is I like to show this is from the London Gazette from July of 1778. And this is the actual report by General Pigot to the event that happened. He's talking about the Pigot Galley and under the, you know, and so you can find this online. It's available. You can read it. It's quite interesting. And you can see it continued on. So this is Pigot's letter to Clinton about the raid on Bristol and Warren. On May 27th is when it was, but it was published on July 78 in the London paper. So 5 days later, on May 30th, 1778, after the raids had been completed, General Pigot is told that up the river, in the Taunton River, in the place called Falls River, was 15,000 linear feet of wood, and sawmills and grain mills, and the deluded rebels were preparing to build stuff to come and get you. Now, here's the truth. There probably was 15,000 feet of linear feet of sawwood, and maybe they were going to build boats, but this was also an area that sold lumber for its fortune. So it made sense to me that they would have lumber. Notice it says Falls River, and I just kind of circle this. Falls River is actually identified on this map. So it is actually identified, and it's identified as Falls River, not Fall River.
Wow.
So it is identified.
So that's where we are.
Yeah, that's where we are. So His Majesty, 54th Regiment of Foot, is the one that makes the raid down here on Fall River. And so about 12 o'clock, 100 to 150 regulars from the 54th, along with 10 to 15 whaling boats, longboats, etc., from the HMS Flora, Orpheus, Juno, and Kingfisher, under the command of Captain Christensen from the Kingfisher, leave Newport. Now, the timing here, please understand their best guesses based on talking to people in modern times of how long it would take to row, and et cetera, et cetera. So these are guesses. These times are not accurate at all, but just trying to get a general idea and help you understand.
Can you imagine having to row that distance
Oh, yeah.
with an outgoing tight?
And remember that you've got you know, at least 10 to 15 soldiers in each boat who aren't rowing.
Right, just saying.
Right. So this is about 1 o'clock along with the row galley P. Joe. Now it's interesting that P. Joe or Piggott or however you say it is the row galley and is also the general. It's kind of interesting, but hey, I don't think the two had anything to do with each other. This is to give you an idea of what a row galley was, to get an idea. That's a model of the row galley Washington. And a row galley was a shallow draft boat. It was pretty big, about 60 feet or so, and it could have a crew as many as 60 that would actually literally row, like the Vikings and the Romans kind of thing. They would row so that they could get into shallow draft areas. So they came down with that boat. Now stop and think about it. If you're coming down with a boat like that and you're going to shell, potentially, it would be devastating if you were the people on land. So what happens? The row galley runs aground at Common Fence Point. And so what happens is the soldiers in the gunboats and the whale boats kind of hang around for a while trying to get the row galley free, and they can't. So they finally decide that, wait a minute, time's waving, we're going to go on. We're going to head on. So they just head on rowing down the river. That brings my best guess around 3 o'clock in the morning, where they really get into the mouth of the river, leaving the bay, kind of over in this area, right over where the Borden Light is my guess, and I'm guessing, please. They get in that area. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, the sentinel, his name is Samuel Reed, hails the boats coming in. Now, there was always a sign, countersign event happening. Well, he hailed them and they didn't respond. So what he does is he fires upon them. Now, that's the signal for the rest of the militia to come and get together. Now, right down where the old Firestone used to be, what's there now? Something's there now. Tillison's there?
Yeah.
Okay, so right about there was a guardhouse that General John Sullivan had commissioned Colonel Durfee to make a place for training and for the 20 militiamen that were going to be serving in this area, because they were ready. They knew something was happening. So we had 20 militiamen ready to go, and so the alert was sent off. They gather, they get themselves together, and the whale boats land right at the mouth of the Quequechan River, which is right about where about in that general area where the battleship is today. At 5 o'clock in the morning, as I say, the militia have assembled at the guardhouse, and the regulars have disembarked, and they're firing the planks and they're firing the buildings, and they're trying to cause general havoc. And this kind of gives you an idea, using that map, we get a sense of where we are, kind of giving you an idea of where I think they are, I should say. So what happens is about 6 o'clock, 20-odd men from the engage the regulars with small arm fire. So they open fire on them. But the Brits have a cannon, and they use grape shot. Now, grape shot is probably one of the more scary things in the Revolutionary War. I had a model, and fortunately I didn't bring it. But essentially, it's a bunch of these little balls all welded together, put into a canister, fired out of a cannon, so it would explode, and it would be like a shotgun today, but you'd be getting it from a cannon. So it was really devastating, and that essentially pushed the militia up the Pecasset Hill, essentially up Anawan Street. So if you get yourself in mind, they're moving up Anawan Street. So about 6:30 in the morning, as I say, they retreat up and they cross from the south side to the north side, and they tear up the wooden planks on that wooden bridge that we talked about earlier, so that the British can't come across it. Now, the river clearly there is not something that you could ford easily, otherwise the British would have just walked across it. So clearly there was some kind of falls or something there that didn't make it convenient to get across, but convenient to get across by wood. So the regulars are split by the force. Some of them stay down by the boats, obviously, and some of them come up to attack Colonel Durfee. Colonel Durfee's ranks swell. Obviously, the alarm was sent off. Guys from Somerset, well, no Somerset at the time, it was still called Swansea. Guys from Swansea, guys from Dighton, Rehoboth, from Assonet, from all around, Tiverton, you name it, they all come in as fast as they can, and his ranks swell to about 40 men. So he's got about 40 men under arms, all militia, none of them trained except for him. Now, I do want to mention something about Colonel Durfee. Colonel Durfee was 28 years old at the time of this attack. By 25, he had already had 60 men under arms in Great Plains, New York. He was a seasoned soldier by the time he was 28 years old. And I mean seasoned. He knew what he was doing, which is an interesting thing. The regulars, these ranks come up, they get behind a stone wall and they do the standard New England tactics. They hide behind trees, they hide behind anything they can, and they start picking them off. They kill two British soldiers on the field, right where they lay, right at the top of Pocasset Hill. One gets shot through the jaw, the other one does get shot and is left on the field. And now that statement about left on the field is important, and I'll explain in a minute. The regulars retreat the field. So they say, you know, this is enough for us. We did what we needed to do. They move and retreat the field. They're pursued by the militia. The militia is pursuing them with the heavy small arm fire. They keep going after them. What happens is they set afire the rest of the buildings and even Richard Borden's house. Richard Borden is called an aged man. The records I've found is he seems to be around 73. That was the only record I could find that he was about. And they take him as a prisoner. They take him in the boat and they disembark and they start heading back toward Newport. This is all, you know, a couple of hours of time. So the regulars then take Mr. Borden and grab him out and stand him up in the boat to use him as a shield. But apparently Mr. Borden is a feisty old gent.
Just tell him to shoot anyway, right?
Well, he actually wrestles his way and dives to the bottom of the boat. So he dives to the bottom of the boat. The Brits say, we're not going to have that. They reach down, they grab him up, and they stand back up again. But the colonists still fire. So they think they're going to get saved. They don't. They still fire. We don't know, but we think that one of the soldiers, at least one of the Brits, gets hit. That allows Mr. Borden to become a captive. He's released on parole a couple of days later.
Yeah, like he cares.
Yeah, he doesn't care. And so they continue down the river. All the time they are being shot at by the picket guard all the way down. So by this time, the entire place is abuzz and everybody's trying, wow, it's fun time, let's shoot at the Brits kind of thing. So they continue and they continue down the river. The regulars head back to Newport and the militia then regroups and moves up to bury the dead at the top of Pocasset Hill.
How many died?
2. There were 2 soldiers that died, no American injuries whatsoever.
Oh, okay, so the British soldiers.
2 soldiers, 2 British soldiers died, no American soldiers. And then what happened is the battle took only about 90 minutes from start to finish. It was all done in 90 minutes. And then right about noontime, is the record says, Colonel Durfee says, is that they buried them at Pocasset Hill. So if you will, the 2 soldiers would have been buried right where Etna is today, or whatever that thing is. They were disinterred in the 1800s when the granite block was put in. And then they were moved to the North End burial ground, and we have not been able to find the graves.
The granite block wasn't where Etna is.
Or whatever that is then, I don't know. Then
The granite
that
block
building.
was across the street.
Okay, so it was across the street,
Right
but
on
that
top of
area.
the highway.
Yeah, up in that area. It was where
Oh, I may be
Pocasset burial ground. I couldn't tell you, I wouldn't know.
Maybe wrong. Oh, you know what, because Etna, oh, I'm sorry, you know what it is? Etna occupied 2 buildings on North Main.
I'm just thinking that general
so
area.
You're right on the one that's there now that says Etna.
I'm just thinking that general area, right at the top of the hill.
Where Sears used to be on Fall River.
So again, the same thing. This is from the Herald. This is the letter dated May 31st. So we do know it was really the 30th, and in the London Gazette. This is P. Joe's letter explaining, and essentially the stories corroborate, which is really interesting. Here is the general's report to the general, the commanding general, and then also I'll show you one other Here is another piece where we get a lot of the original information. This is reminiscence of Colonel Joseph Durfee. Part of it was for his petition for pension.
Right,
And that's how we know most of the stuff we know about what happened. And this is available. You can get this online at through the library. It's available. You can read it. The British account was by Major Frederick Mackenzie, and if you've done any colonial or Revolutionary War study, you'll know that name. He was a famous diarist. He kept a lot of diaries. He was a soldier throughout the Revolutionary War on the British side, and he kept really, really tight diary. And I'm not going to, I'd certainly let you read it if you want, but you can see it's really too hard to read. On the screen is too much information. But I just wanted you to see it. This is actually his entry about the Battle of Falls River.
Thank God for diarists, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. We wouldn't have half the information if it weren't for the diarists. So some of the players, just to give you a general idea, and again, tell me if I'm boring you at any point in time. The Honorable Thomas Durfee, aka Captain Durfee, a little bit about him. But what's important is he was a very high-minded and upright, intelligent man. This is from, I'm not sure where the quote was. He was called to a high place in public service, and during the Revolution, he used a large portion of his estate to further the cause of independence. So it's a very interesting kind of guy. He helped pay for a lot. Mrs. Durfee, Patience Borden, is very important because she actually let loose the deer in the deer park, knowing the British were coming, and didn't want them to grab the deer for foodstuffs. But surprising to her and to all of the family around the area, the deer had returned before the day had ended.
Really?
So there's Captain, and you'll notice I got Major because he was a captain at 25 years old at the Battle of White Plains. He didn't become a major until the Battle of Rhode Island, which takes place only a few short months later in August of 1778. And as I said, he was the leader of the militia in the Battle of Falls River. Just some artifacts. So this is one I always like putting up because I live in Dighton, and I always love this. Dighton, D-I-T-O-N. So they phonetically spelt it. They actually had to put in the thing, say, no, we mean Dighton, Mass. Sergeant Henry Brightman. So there's a lot of names that you're going to know for street names. He was a second in command. He joined the battle after the alarm, and he helped successfully repulse. And he became a captain of his own company in 1780. Corporal Samuel Reed, he's the one who sounded the alarm. He was the third in command under Durfee, and he was a sentry on that morning. So he was the one that first saw it, set the alarm, and got everything to action. And of course, there were 18 other militia members, 18 privates. A lot of the names you'll notice there: Turner, Reed. The 24 is his age.
Oh, okay.
And if you'll notice that they are brothers of Major Durfee. So this is his 24-year-old brother and his 17-year-old brother, Charles. And then you'll also notice other names in there like Ellsbury, Chase, Cook, Borden, Brayton. So there's a lot of names that are very familiar to us from this area. That were the foundation. The Sons of the American Revolution has provided grave markers for the North End Burial Ground. So if you are interested, the North End Burial Ground has Colonel Joseph Durfee's grave, Thomas Durfee's grave, and Robert Irving's grave. Whatever, however.
Put a big plaque or something on a rock down there for him. I think it was Durfee.
Yeah, may very well have been. Oak Grove Cemetery has Ephraim Boomer, Elijah Caswell, and Benjamin Peck. And the Northbrook Steep Cemetery grounds has Captain James Simmons and Benjamin Weaver, who were all honored by the Sons of the American Revolution. The players on the Loyalist side, as I talked about, Captain Robert Piggott, who was the second baronet. He was the commander. He took over when Prescott was captured, and then he never released command until they actually left. He actually fought John Sullivan and Lafayette and Colonel General Greene in the Battle of Rhode Island. So he actually had 3,000 men against the 5,000, which is really interesting, against Sullivan. His Majesty's 54th Foot and the 22nd Regiment were the ones that were participated. Major Edmund Ayres is the one who led the raid on Fall River. and he oversaw the destroying of the planking, etc. But the interesting thing about him is, for history looks at him for his participation with General Benedict Arnold later on in the raid on Fort Griswold, otherwise known as the Griswold Massacre, where Arnold ordered the bayoneting of every American in the fort. They just bayoneted it, wounded, surrendering, they just killed them all. And it was all under the orders of Benedict Arnold. So not only was he a traitor, he was a really nasty character.
Well, he got his just desserts.
Well, not really. I mean, depending
He was
on...
allowed to leave the country.
Yeah, he lived in, he
But
died in England.
But his wife and the family were not allowed to leave the country.
He died poverty stricken. He didn't lead a good life.
So, essentially that was the battle. I don't think there's really much there. I like showing this again because it gives an overlay, gets you a visual understanding of where things are. So this is where Captain Durfee and Major Edmonds were. Kind of give you an idea. The red spot is where the soldiers fell. That's where the British kind of disembarked, we think. And so the 54th of Foot were the only two that were killed. Private Charles Burnham of Stephen Brimfield's company and William Danks of Captain William Tiswell's company. They were buried at the top of the Picasa Hill by Durfee and his men,
So they
as
have
we
the
said.
names of them.
We do have the names and we do have their records. We just don't have the remains. We don't have the remains. Yeah, or we don't know the final resting place. Just some stats so you get a general idea. 2 homes were destroyed, and destroyed is in quotes because they were set on fire, but supposedly the militia was able to put them out.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say.
Yeah, so destroyed, you know, it's all relative. The 2 people were killed, the 2 soldiers were killed. No militia or colonists were killed. Richard Borden, as I said, age 73, he was released unharmed a few days later. It's important to understand that and I always bring this in just for a little bit of point, that shortly after, on July 29th, the Comte d'Estaing arrived with his fleet. And this is actually the Comte d'Estaing's plan for the Battle of Rhode Island after he met with General Greene and Lafayette off of Point Judith. So July 29th, he arrives at Point Judith. August 9th, Howe's fleet is delayed departing New York because of headwinds. They're not able to get out. On the 10th, d'Estaing, fearing that they were going to reinforce and that they were going to be able to outnumber them, sails out to do battle with Howe. This is Howe's brother, Richard. Who's the other one? I forgot the other one's name. Richard is the admiral, and maybe it's Robert. I don't know. Who's the commanding officer of the troops. The weather, and in that same time, the weather deteriorates into what they call a big blow, or we would call a hurricane. And it raged for about 2 days, essentially scattering the fleet, destroying the ships, and so that battle never took place. Afterwards, the French sailed to Delaware to regroup and then moved on, came back up to Newport, and then moved on to Boston. And there's a whole story about how Lafayette and d'Estaing were treated with contempt in Boston and kind of called cowards because they would not fight. But it was really, from a military standpoint, the smart thing to do. And this is the map of the positions that were drawn of the Marquis de Lafayette and Sullivan for the attack. And this is around August of 78.
Interesting how west was at the top of that.
Yeah.
Or did you just rotate the scan?
No. This is actually the way they did it. They were in these little blocks. So this is actually wood.
Oh, okay.
Those spaces are actually wood.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was actually their map. Yeah, it is interesting that the way it would, but I guess that is kind of
Usually
strange.
it was north, or there was a period where east was at the top.
Yeah, and you would turn it.
I've
Yeah,
never seen west
I mean
at the
it's
top.
I can't read French, so if anybody can read French, it's written in French. It's a French
They did have
map.
a compass rose on it too.
Yeah,
She can read French.
Not enough, I have no.
yeah.
Which clearly-
But it's interesting. So I think maybe the goal was to show Providence because that was the biggest city around. Maybe that was the goal, was to show. I don't know. But then you can see it showing Providence, Warwick, Greenwich. I'm not even sure where that is. Might be Cranston, who knows? You know, and they show.
That's the harbor where they burn the little baby boat. And
Wait, that would be here, right? This is Warwick.
No, well, there are a couple of coves
So it would have
there.
been right here.
Greenwich. Oh, no, I'm thinking the one down.
Yeah. Oh, it might be down. Yeah. The Gatsby.
Yeah, I'm like, I've got a mental block on that word today.
So, again, historical interpretation, the Lafayette Durfee Historical Foundation, we host a lot of these presentations or try to host these presentations, and we try to maintain this as a living history museum. We work closely with the South Coast Historical Organization, which does children's educational programs in the area. And so we're always looking for support. I mean, you know, not necessarily looking for a checkbook, but we are looking for docents and things like that, and just anybody who wants to get involved. We're looking to do things like that. You can see that we have living history events. We have the Bourbonnais. Oh, actually, did I say that? Oh, look at that. So we have the Regiment La Bourbonnais, which is the 1780s French regiment that marched with Rochambeau from Newport down to Yorktown, and actually was important in Redoubt number 9 and 10 in helping turn the Battle of Yorktown. And they marched across down the 95 corridor, and they will actually be here drilling in our backyard and then living 18th century life in the house. We don't know the date, so we'll look at our website. We do know it's going to be in July. We're not sure whether it's going to be like the 16th or the 22nd. They're still trying to come up with their date. That's it. Support the Lafayette Durfee House. Some resources. And that's it. Yeah, please.
June 11th.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I'm glad you said that. So also June 11th, the Lafayette Durfee House, is it AHA still? No?
Yes.
It is still AHA, okay. In conjunction with AHA, we'll be hosting a Colonial Day event where the house will turn back into the 18th century. There'll be reenactors here dressed in period clothing, as well as a sailmaker, knot, blacksmith, tinner. We might have a sutler or fabric guy.
Colonial Navy.
And the Colonial Navy will be here playing. And did I miss anything else? It'll be 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock. It's open to the public. We want you to come. Want you to tell your friends. Want you to walk by, talk to people. By the way, these people love history. And you obviously do as well. So they're the right people to come in and have conversations with. Some of them may talk your ear off. That could be the worst problem, right? Last but not least, before I turn us over to anybody who wants to continue the tour with Dave or myself giving you a tour, is that this was all started, and the reason why this all came about is a book that I'm currently writing, which will hopefully come out for the 240th anniversary next year. It'll be a digital interactive book. And it's actually, the name of the book is taken from the documents. It's without regard to friend or foe. So keep an eye on that. The house will let you know when it's going to be released.
So it's only be available digitally?
Yeah, because it's going to be interactive. There'll be a lot of things that you can click on. You'll be able to watch videos of things happening. You'll see muskets fire, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I like to collect history books.
Yeah, I have to admit that, I'm saying I'm writing this book. That's a little bit of a misnomer. I'm actually more compiling it because I'm not really writing anything. I'm just kind of pulling things together. And I'm trying to make it using maps, so we have things like that, so it's exciting and accessible is the whole idea.
I see.
So before I do let you go, and before we let you get out of here, there's just a couple of last things. One is I'm going to pass the musket around so you can actually see how much this weighed. It's surprising. You don't realize it's quite as heavy as it is. So be ready. See? And then while that's happening, I just want to talk a little bit about my display here. This is just to help you understand what went in. At the top is what's called the Pickering charge. That was the charge from 1764 and the charge that was used by the British. So you can see it would have been a lot of work. They would have taken the ball, put it at the top, tied at the top of the ball, tied it at the back of the ball, added the charge. A lot of work. This is an exploded view of what it would have been like. This charge here is what's called the French charge. This is the charge we moved to later on in the American Revolution. Essentially, you put the ball right in and you didn't do any other rope tying, so it was a lot faster and easier to do. This last charge there is an example of what's called a reenactor charge. It has no bullet, just has black powder. This piece here is a flint, and what a flint, now you can pass it around if you'd like. It's just a piece of stone. That's a flint before it's ready to be used. This is the actual flint when it's formed and ready to be used in a weapon. Oh, great. Yeah, and actually, my friend Dave was able to have some grape shot, and so I can pass this around, right? Just understand that what I'm passing around is actually lead, so, you know, I mean, you're not children, but don't, make sure you wash your hands and don't put it in your mouth kind of stuff. Well, we do a lot of school programs, so we gotta tell the kids that.
No, I don't want to touch them. I've got lead balls, but, you know.
This is, yeah, pretty heavy, isn't it? This is this is a tool for cleaning and working on the gun. So the idea is this would be a pick to pick the touch hole. This is a screw to use as a screwdriver, and a clean to clean out your area. The paper that you see there is just there as a demonstration. What would happen is you would cut your paper. Typically, it would be a piece of typically it would be a piece of paper that was coming out of a book or something like that. Don't tell any of my teacher friends. And they would cut it into this trapezoidal shape, so it would be in a shape like this. And then they would use some form of a dowel or something along these lines, and they would grab the paper and the dowel, and they would grab the musket ball. Now I'm left-handed, so I'm going to be a little backwards. So you would grab the elements like this, and then we would put the ball in, tight, tighten this down.
And they can fill the rest with
Now
powder.
you'd fill the rest with powder, fold it over, and then you would have a cartridge ready to go. That would then go into my cartridge box,
Now,
and I'd be ready to go.
is there any truth to the fact that they like to use fabric like silk?
That would have been rifles because it was called winding, and winding is this distance between. Can I grab the musket?
You dropped your microphone.
Did I?
Yes.
Oh, I did. That's going to sound nice in the recording. You know, I wonder if you could like maybe go over it with a little sound there. Might be nice for a nice 17th century, 18th century interlude, musical interlude, maybe. No, sorry. So if you'll notice the barrel, this is what's called a smooth bore. And what that means is they would actually, this is actually a 75 caliber, but it actually would use probably a 69 caliber bullet. And what you would do is it would be the paper would take up the extra space in the barrel, because otherwise the ball would bounce going out of the barrel. It actually still does bounce going out of the barrel. You've heard the term can't hit the side of a barn door? That's where it comes from, because you could shoot at the house across the street and not hit it.
Right. You could go anywhere.
But with a rifle, which Daniel Morgan's group had, and some guys out of Vermont, I think, had, they were actually rifled, which is actually grooves cut in, looks like the inside of a bolt,
Yeah.
and then the
Lands
bullet,
and grooves, yeah.
and the bullet would spin tighter. Another couple of things about the musket that I always like talking about in general is when we look at the musket, this area here, we have the frizzen. This is actually not a Revolutionary War period. This is a reenactor's tool, and it's the safety. It's called a hammer stall or a frizzen cover, and it just stops the flint from making contact. This brass piece is also not Revolutionary War. This is also a reenactor's piece. It's actually a flash guard, because the powder goes in this pan and it would shoot out this way. And when you're standing next to the line, you'd get it in the face, so they put up the guard. There's a touch hole in there. And so I've got this whole area, which includes my hammer and my frizzen guard, my pan. I have the barrel, and then I have the stock, lock, stock, and barrel. Another one that I like is that if I were to fire my weapon and it were not to really go off, but only the powder in the pan, that's a flash in the pan. And then another one that we don't realize is that when I'm in this position, I'm in the half-cocked position. Don't go off half-cocked. And one of the other things that was really important for a soldier is they had to keep their powder dry, because powder wouldn't fire in the rain, so keep your powder dry. So there's a lot of the sayings that we have today, as we talked about, and we'll hear a few more in the house, as we talked about, that came from the colonial period.
I have a question. Do you know when the Quakers came to this area?
When the Quakers came to the area?
Yeah, because I'm curious, because they wouldn't fight. the Quakers, they wouldn't fight.
Oh, but they funded it.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, that's a misnomer. You're right. They wouldn't. Most of the Quakers wouldn't take up arms,
Right.
but they paid for it,
Okay, okay, I didn't know that.
and they were in this area.
And they were in the, at that time, that's my.
I don't know about this particular area, but they were in New England.
Yeah, well, I know.
Yeah, they were in New
They were
England.
here in
Sure.
the 17th century.
Yeah, they
Oh,
were. Yeah,
So they were here.
yeah.
Because the Puritans wanted to kill them all the time. They threw them out of Boston.
Check out the.
Yeah.
Look,
Yeah,
this
that's why a
area,
lot
Fall
of them ended
River.
up on
New
Nantucket.
Bedford, the Quakers founded New Bedford,
Yeah, okay.
or at Cushing.
Right. And it's interesting and Dave brought up the point. One of the things that we always talk about, religious freedom in America and all of that great stuff, and and we all agree with that. And I'm not saying anything, but one of the things that's interesting about Massachusetts and Massachusetts Bay Colony is we believed in freedom of religion as long as it was the religion we believed in.
Right, as long as it was your
They hung more Quakers
Yep.
on Boston Common for being Quakers.
Yeah, I know, there's a
And hung 'em.
statue of a woman. Yeah. She was
And they hung them. They didn't just, it wasn't just persecution. They hung them. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, discussions?
I have a question,
Please.
not specific
Yeah,
to
no,
this
please,
event,
please.
but, so I'm a member of the Masonic Lodge here in
Yes.
Fall River, and the charter is from 1824 for the village of Troy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when did we go from Lower Freetown
Yep.
to Troy to Fall River?
So Dave can maybe correct me, but 1803 is when we became Fall River, one word.
Okay,
Shortly, within a year, we became Troy.
okay.
We were Troy for 30 years. And in 1833, we became the city of Fall River, two words.
Two words. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, 1833. That's correct, right? 33? Yeah. I'm not really a Fall River historian. My only interest is in the Revolution and what happened with the Revolution, but by reading that, you come across some of that stuff.
Sure.
So if I can answer any of the questions, other than that, folks, we really thank you for coming. Please take a brochure. Please go to our Facebook page, which is Facebook/Lafayette Durfee House. Please go to our website, LafayetteDurfeeHouse.org. You'll find a list of our events. If you go under the events, you'll see every event that we have coming up. All of our events are free. We encourage you to become a member because we have a lovely, lovely party here in the holiday season. If nothing else, that's the reason to do it. We turn the house into a kind of a tavern, if you will, but in holiday dress. And it's beautiful. It really is a beautiful event. It's $25, come on. We're not talking a lot. Anyway, whoever would like to continue with the tour, please let me know, and either Dave and I will continue showing you around the house. I don't know if you're talked out. You might be talked out. I don't know. But thank you for coming.
Thank you.